What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. We're back in the top 25 video. These have been a ton of fun to do. We're at number 13, Oklahoma Sooners. We're going to be talking about Oklahoma, what they look like moving forward, what their depth chart looks like, what their recruiting looks like, and then what their schedule is. And then are they getting underrated? We're going to be talking about the over-under win total, and it's of the lowest of any of these guys in the top 18. So I think that is pretty interesting as you look at it. But before we dive into the 24 season, we do have to talk about last year. Brent Venables turning around last year after the 6-7 season, 10-3 last year. Looks very good down the stretch. You know, Dylan Gabriel was one of those team quarterbacks, 3,600 yards, 30 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. Gavin Sawchuk kind of jumped out at the running back position. And Oklahoma was right there. When you're looking at just their schedule and everything there, they start off really hot, beating Texas. Then they lost those two games against Kansas and Oklahoma State. And really it came down to, when you're looking at the points and everything, how they lost, they were 8 points away from probably going to the playoff. That's how close they were. They could have replaced Texas pretty easily, but they lost those two games. They were to beat West Virginia, BYU, Texas Christian. And then they did lose in that Alamo Bowl, but I don't really count Alamo Bowls and like the non-playoff bowl games just because of the players there. But we did see that guy, Jackson Arnold. He came out of there and got to play a little bit, and that's who they are moving forward with now and going into the season. So let's look at their offense. Let's talk about kind of what they have coming back. And last year too, it's kind of the same offense, new offensive coordinator, new quarterback, but still kind of the same principles there. Last year, their offense was really good. 41.7 points per game, number 3 in the nation. Yards per game, they were number 3 at 507. Really, they were excellent in third down conversion, 8th in the country. They did great there. Rushing, they were kind of middle of the pack. 50th-ish in that range there. Their passing, which really was where it was in terms of yards per pass. The yardage was there, passing yards per game. But the efficiency wasn't necessarily there for Gabriel. He kind of went back and forth there. He's gone now. Now it's Jackson Arnold team, and this is a risk for this team because, you know, with Gabriel, if they could have got him to come back, he's at Oregon now, maybe they could have pushed in the SEC and been there. But do we think, I think the question is, and we love Jackson Arnold. He was our QB1 coming out when he was a high schooler. Can he lead this team now in the SEC and be that guy for them?
I think the answer is still yes, but I think the team has to be a little bit concerned about what this offensive line makeup is. There's a ton of turnover in that group from the draft to the transfer portal. And so when you're talking about a first-year starting quarterback, it's not ideal that one of the issues that we could potentially foresee is in the trench ahead of him. Now, I think they like some of their transfers. Jacob Sexton was okay up and down when he got in the lineup, and that's going to be his new left tackle. But to me, Jackson Arnold kind of has the capability to make things happen when pockets muddy. That's what is super appealing about Jackson Arnold, is his ability to work inside of structure, but also to get outside the pocket and make plays. With these wide receivers, I think he's in really good shape. Nick Anderson had a bit of a breakout year last year. Deion Burks transferred in, and everyone seems to love him. I think he's a really good slot receiver, and I think he fits this team really well. Jaquace Pettaway is going to rotate in there as well. Andrew Anthony coming back from an injury. I think that we're hoping that he gets back to where he was. I still like Jaleel Farouk. I don't know. Maybe I'm crazy, but I still think that he can play a little bit. So, and then you talk about this running back room that's just loaded. Gavin Sawchuk had a massive breakout type of year last year. Javonte Barnes was a little bit disappointing, but now Caleb Hicks is there. So this offense should be at least close to as good as last year. I think there's going to be a few more bumps along the way, and maybe the SEC schedule makes that even tougher. But to me, this offense still has the capability to put up, 35 plus points, maybe not 41, but maybe 35.
Yeah, I mean, and when you're looking at it, they lost Levy last year. Obviously, he went over to Mississippi State, took the head coaching job. But, I mean, it wasn't perfect with that offense and the offensive coordinator there. I think him, Levy and Venables didn't necessarily I don't know if they didn't get along, but there were some things out there with Art Briles, all that other stuff that happened on the field. And they brought in Seth Luttrell from North Texas, and who is an accomplished coach there. Joe John Finley, who was the tight ends coach, was going to be elevated to kind of offensive coordinator as well. So they're going to kind of do that in tandem. That's good. I think that's a great group of guys and leader of men that they're going to have there that understand the system, understand to kind of develop Jackson Arnold, because that's the key. They got to develop him there. But yes, the biggest question mark to me is that offensive line. And like you mentioned, like they got to protect this kid, especially in the SEC. It's one thing they have like an unsure offensive line in the Big 12. You can kind of get away with it. Maybe you can kind of score more points than the other team, have those 40-point games, last year playing Texas Christian, those type of games. You can't do that going to LSU. You can't do that playing against the teams in the SEC. So I do think that is the biggest, how does it gel? And I think their schedule lines up with that. We'll look at their schedule. First 3 games, they can definitely gel into that, but that's going to be key for them. Hey, how do they step up and how do they make sure that they protect Jackson Arnold? When you're looking at losses from last year, they lost a lot from the offensive line. Like if we're going to keep that, 100 on here, Tyler Guyton, again, raw-ish, but he was out there for them, and he was very solid. Walter Rouse, Savion Beard as well. So when you're looking at kind of where their transfers are, they did lose a lot of guys as the transfers. Savion Beard went from S to SMU. Caden Green as well, going to Missouri. Nate Anderson going to SMU. SMU opened up their NIL as they go to the ACC. They have some fun there. So really, it's offensive line. Like they that's really what they did. I could have put Dylan Gabriel up here, but to me, Jackson Arnold's kind of a wash in that range. But that's really where they got to develop, and they're going to have to show some improvement.
Yeah, I think Dylan Gabriel doesn't. It's kind of disrespectful, and I know Oklahoma fans probably feel a certain way about Dylan Gabriel, but the reason Dylan Gabriel transferred is because the team said, we are turning the keys over to Jackson Arnold. Like, yeah. I think that was pretty clear, and that is the right move for Jackson Arnold's path. Jackson Arnold has the potential to be a Heisman winner, but like we said, the offensive line does need to gel because this is a lot of losses in the trench on offense. That's not good when this happens.
Yeah, it just when you're looking at it, you're just like, man, they did lose a lot of guys there. And I think the one thing that is interesting as we get into the recruits, and I was going through this and I was studying and kind of diving into the team. And yes, YouTube commenters, I swear we do study for these and we dive into it and looking at kind of just the stats and all that. The one thing that I didn't realize, Oklahoma hasn't produced a first-team All-American since 2019. That to me is shocking because when you're looking at Oklahoma and the talent that we expect from them, they've kind of been down there a little bit. And now you're going to the SEC. So can they produce that talent? And really where it starts is how are they recruiting, right? What's the recruiting looking like out there? Number 12 overall ranked composite was 8th. They did go and address some needs, a lot of needs, as you can see from the board. Eugene Brooks, interior offensive line. Zion Kearney, I messed that up. But number 26 wide receiver out of Missouri City, Texas. They addressed needs, and I thought that they did a good job here. Really where he dives in, and we know where Venables is going to go recruit is the defensive side, and he got some dudes on that side there. But Taylor Tatum is probably the big guy of this class, running back number 1 at his position out there. Is not an early enrollee, so that is something to note. He's going to the camp now coming into July and August. So he's going to have to get accustomed to that. Zion Ragens as well, some of those guys. But I think Tatum is the big guy in this class that they're holding their hat on.
Yeah, I like Tatum. He's not my RB1, but I do like him quite a bit. And I think he fits what they want to do. I mean, we look at what Gavin Sawchuk was able to do in this offense last year. I think there's some similarities between Tatum and Sawchuk in terms of, especially as recruits. They remind me a lot of each other, and I think that means that there's a certain type of running back that I think can succeed in this offense. I like Devon Mitchell at tight end. I think that's a pretty big get, especially with some uncertain tight end depth there. Mm-hmm. You bring in a transfer, but Devon Mitchell has an opportunity maybe to get on the field as early as this year. These wide receivers probably aren't going to touch the field with all the depth in front of them, and a lot of these 3-stars are just going to be fighting to stay on the roster in a couple of years. But overall, this is a deep class where you're taking shots at a ton of players. I think they're doing a good job in recruiting for what it's worth. And they haven't even gotten the SEC bump just yet, probably.
Yeah. I mean, they know that they're coming in there, but I will say with the Eugene Brooks, interior offensive lineman there, 6'4", 320, big boy, but he's out here in California. So that is something to know. Oklahoma's going to go get some California boys, and you got to get California boys, especially maybe at the interior offensive lineman, those places in the SEC, because those other schools are doing it. And for him to go in there, Sierra Canyon, kind of in, USC's backyard as well, to go get those guys, that's a big win for Venables and that coaching staff there. And Drew Hill, he's the director of player personnel out there. Transfers, they were ranked number 20 in the nation out there in transfers. So they definitely filled some needs when you're looking at kind of how they went about it. Branson Hickman, again, so interior offensive lineman, they definitely did that. He went from SMU to Oklahoma. So those dudes are just trading players. And then, you look at Garyon Hatchett from Washington, another solid piece out there. At Washington with the coaching change, comes back there. Casey Thompson comes home. He's coming home from FAU back to back, not home, just across the way. He was at Texas before, but now at Oklahoma there. Jake Roberts, Michael Tarkin, those guys. So a lot of fun pieces here, kind of filling them in, going there. Casey's interesting. I think he's important though, because with Jackson Arnold, with that offensive line, if you got injured, banged up, provide some leadership. Casey Thompson's been in college football for a while. And so I think that was a big gift for them, just to provide that leadership.
Yeah, took the words right out of my mouth. I was going to say that's actually probably the most critical. Obviously, the offensive linemen coming in, I think, are very important. And as we talked about, those guys will need to gel. And I think that there's a lot of upside with those guys. I don't want all you Oklahoma fans I think this offensive line is terrible. I just think that it will be a little bit different. Casey Thompson, though, he's going to be that like veteran leader for Jackson Arnold. And I think he knew his role coming in. And so I think he also wanted to stick it to Texas a little bit. So I think that's a fun one. Jake Roberts is an interesting one. He has a bit of a receiving profile. It doesn't like pop off the page, but I think there's, I talked about Devon having an opportunity. I think Jake Roberts is going to be a fine piece for them. And we know they like to utilize their tight end at times. We'll see if he's able to be an impact player, but overall, this is a good transfer class in my opinion.
Yeah, no, they did a good job there. And when you look at overall their offense, impact players, it starts in with that guy, Jackson Arnold. We talked about that. Gavin Sawchuk, Deion Burks, and Andre Anthony. And the big thing with Anthony that I just wanted to point out with him, he's the type of kid, and I know I am a little biased, but he's the type of kid to me that could be SEC talent, like breakaway speed. SEC really can be that playmaker that they're going to need in games, kind of be that big play threat, those type of guys. But they have built a heck of a wide receiver core around Jackson Arnold, in my opinion, that kind of, works well with his strengths. Kind of that deep threat, and Farouk and Antrell Anthony, Deion Burks, kind of that underneath guy as well. Nick Anderson can definitely do it as well. So those are the guys that I like to see. But I think that this wide receiver crew is good enough to really kind of be SEC talent. I think that's something if Jackson's going to elevate himself, he's going to have to make dump passes. He's going to have to get quick slants. He's going to have to save himself from those turnovers that he can kind of have. He definitely has a little gunslinger, and that's why I like him, but he has that gunslinger in there. So if he can limit those mistakes by just getting the ball out quick into his playmakers, then this offense is going to be really good.
Yeah, there's some Baker Mayfield in Jackson Arnold. I think that gunslinger mentality can get him into trouble, but also as he continues to develop and being supremely accurate, I think we're looking, like I said, at a potential Heisman winner. Andrell Anthony, I don't know why there's no buzz about this kid in draft circles. I've liked this kid since he was at Michigan. I watched the film and it's like, yeah, that's an NFL wide receiver. I watched the film. Deion Burks is an NFL wide receiver. I'm not quite sure about Gavin just yet, but overall, this is like a very, very talented offense that I think rides or dies with Jackson Arnold and that offensive line. If that offensive line can give him just an ounce of time, I think that they'll be in good shape. I think they'll be able to move the ball down the field, which is all they need to do.
Yeah. Now let's go over to the defense. Let's take a look. Biggest thing is 11 of the top 13 tacklers for them return. So when you look at that, they have a lot of returning on that defensive side of the ball. And last year, they were hit and miss with their defense. Like opponents' points per game, they were 41st, Opponent yards per game, 67th. So kind of middle of the pack there. Rush defense was okay. When you're looking at opponent rushes per game and yards per game, they sat in that 48, 49 mark there. Their pass defense, I'm going to tell you right now, teams really threw it on them. Opponent passing yards per game, they were 100th in the country last year, 131st in opponent passing per game. Now, some of that had to do with the Big 12, but a lot of it had to do with teams realizing, hey, we can just kind of chuck it around on these guys. And really the big number was their sack percentage was only 4%, 111th in college football last year. They just didn't get out the quarterback. And that's really something they're going to have to fix if they want to be successful in the SEC.
Yeah, I think that's where, I still think that there's some issues there. I like Danny Stutzman in the middle there. I like what Woody Washington can potentially be. Billy Bowman Jr. is a really good safety as well. Outside of that, though, it's like we need a ton of these dudes to take a leap forward. Ethan Downs was good. I think that's your best edge rusher at this moment. Trace Ford, though, just wasn't very productive last year. And so where they're going to find the ability to get to the quarterback, that's the main question for me on defense. But really, like, the SEC is a different ballgame, but I do think that Oklahoma's offense will at least give them a shot in every game, even if their defense just gets a few stops per game. I think they're going to be in okay shape with the notion that offense can be a top 10 to 20 unit. So this is a group that I see players that I just think haven't really lived up to their potential, but we're going to see. We're going to see against SEC opponents this year.
That secondary needs help, and the way it needs help is that up front they got to get pressure. They're the best friends up there. And when you're looking at it, you brought up a big point. Ethan Downs was the leading sack getter on this team with 4.5. That's just not going to cut it. Like, that's just not going to be there. And then Danny Stutzman had 3. Like, those are your 2 leading sack getters there. They got to be better. That's just very simple up there, and kind of just attacking that. When you're looking at it from a notable losses perspective, they didn't really lose that many guys on the defensive side of the ball. Like, really, when you're talking about like tackler, when we talked about how 11 to 13 top tacklers came back, even from the transfer portal, when you're looking at like kind of what they left, Key Lawrence is probably the big one when you're thinking of him. But he went to Ole Miss. I mean, he got the bag. The NIL bag out there in Ole Miss was big this offseason. Kevin Gilliam, he went to Virginia Tech, edge guy. But nothing really stood out to me about their losses.
No, I mean, when you don't have a great defense, you don't have an opportunity to lose the great players from your defense. And so I think that works in their favor here. At least they were able to retain some of the talent that they've been developing, and hopefully some other guys can step up. But yeah, Key Lawrence, he played a lot of snaps last year, and I think he was good at times. He was a little bit inconsistent too. I think you can say that about most players on that 2023 defense, but I think Ole Miss is just loading up on as many players as they can possibly afford. And I don't even know if Oklahoma can compete with the money that Ole Miss has over there.
Yeah, no, 100%. Now let's get into their 2024 recruits. All right, David Stone is a bad man out there in IMG Academy in Florida. Dude's going to play this year. I don't care. Like, he's ready to go. 6'4", 275. When you're looking at him there, they talk about him like he can just move. 35-inch arms as well. Kind of gets in the backfield different ways. He wins different ways when you like him there. He can actually, they talked about him being as a 5 or 3 technique. So you like that. He's Venable's X factor, because that's the type of guy that you have to have in the SEC as well. And he was one of the best players, if not the best player, on a defense at IMG that was one of the best in high school last year. He defensive MVP in the Polynesian Bowl. He did a very, very good job. Really, that's the linchpin of this group. When you're thinking of like, hey, who's their guy? It is David Stone. And then they filled out pretty good. Reggie Powers, safety. Again, they needed a need there. Nigel Smith. And I think that when you're looking at who they targeted, they definitely realized they need to go on there and that front 7 and that defensive line and get guys, Jaden Jackson, those type of guys, Edge, Wyatt Gilmore, Danny Okoye. Those guys are the guys that they brought in. And even the cornerbacks they brought in are definitely good pieces too.
Yeah, I didn't want to spoil my thoughts, but I think some of the getting to the quarterback production is coming from this group. I think Wyatt Gilmore and Danny Okoye are 2 guys that have body types at least that are ready to play. I think there's a ton of talent on their high school film. There's a chance that one or both of those guys contributes in a positive and impactful way this year. David Stone, like you mentioned, just an absolute stud. So fun to watch. But, like we said, there's just a ton of 4 stars here that I think have an opportunity with the state of that current defense. There's a non-zero chance that 4 or 5, 6 of these guys are getting meaningful snaps come, the SEC schedule down the road.
Yeah. And another guy I don't want to just throw under the bus, but Jeremiah Newcomb, he's got a little blood out there, NFL blood. When you're looking at his dad, Bobby Newcomb, he was a 6th-round selection in 2001, and his brother was a UCLA defensive back too. And he comes in as the number 33 ranked cornerback, but he's good. When you watch his tape, he's a two-way guy too. So he's definitely an athlete. He closes well. Very, very good hand-eye coordination. They talk about how he's just smooth out there. And that's a guy too in that secondary that can maybe take that next step. And they did a good job of recruiting for the SEC. I think they did a great job on the defensive side. It really just comes down to Oklahoma fans are going to hate it. Offensive line, because that defense, they're getting pieces. Like, they're getting pieces in there, and you're going to see them develop. They definitely kind of went out the transfer portal when you're looking at guys that come in. Caden Woolard, kind of, when you're looking at just overall, like, hey, do you like this kid? From when you're looking at him, yeah, he's okay. Edge rusher, 6'4", 210. Des Malone as well. So, hey, they went and got a guy from San Diego State who was pretty good at San Diego State. San Diego State historically has pretty good defenses there. He's a kid out of Fresno, so I got to give him a shout out, Fresno. But, came in as almost a 90 rated transfer from San Diego State there. Dominic Williams as well could maybe be a guy from TCU, is probably their highest rated transfer, is probably going to start at defensive line and kind of give them that presence there, 6'1", 317, but not a bad class in terms of transfers.
Yeah, Woolard was productive. He played at Miami of Ohio last year, so take that with a bit of a grain of salt. But those small school guys translate a little better than a lot of people anticipate. So, as they look for impact players on that defensive front seven, Caden Woolard, Dominic Williams have a ton of opportunity here. And I think, both of these guys can stay in the rotation at least throughout the entire season. So I think that's I think you can call that a positive transfer class then.
Yeah, and I think Malone is going to start. I mean, they talked about him being kind of in the running there. The biggest thing with them in their secondary, and we'll kind of look at that here in terms of impact players, Dez, Billy Bowman as well. When you look at it, Billy Bowman's a stud. Let me just say that. I love watching him play. 104 tackles there. He had 6 interceptions last year, which was tied for third nationally. But when you look at that, they just got to be more consistent, I think, in coverage. I think that is the big thing. Can they be more consistent there in that side? Then you have Danny Stutzman as well. We know he was an all Big 12 performer last year. When you're looking at first team guy, he was really good. 104 tackles there. And then Dominic Williams, again, their transfer coming in, kind of being that guy in the middle. He's a big piece, though, especially with how SEC teams play. They got to dominate up front. You got to look and stop the run, those type of things. He's going to be a big piece in this. But who's your guy that you're looking at and saying, hey, he's got to be that impact player for him?
Yeah, I mean, it's Stutzman to me. I think holding down the fort on on that second level is pretty critical when we have questions about the first level and we have questions about the secondary. So being in that cleanup duty is going to be pretty important, especially with like we talked about. If that defensive front seven doesn't take those steps forward, I think at least you can hang your hat on a good linebacking room. And Stutzman is the leader there. To me, I'm hoping that Woody Washington takes a step forward and becomes an impact player. I know he's not on this list, but there's some really good stuff on his film, and I think as a run defender, he's really good. He's just got to get more consistent in coverage, which is a theme of this show. But overall, I think they're going to be searching for these impact players. I almost guarantee that there will be 2 to 3 guys that are awesome for them that did not make this list, and that's just the state of their defense right now.
And let's make it clear, Venables is one of the best defensive minds ever. Like, he is one of the best. He's going to get these guys ready and rolling there. All right, let's talk about how disrespected they are right now. Their over-under is at 7.5, which is, again, the lowest that we've seen since Iowa, since we've been doing this. And really, them and Iowa and Oklahoma State are all at 7.5. And they're the last team in this kind of area. Everybody else at 9.5 here. Now, when you look at their schedule, Temple, Houston, Tulane, Tennessee, home, 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 home. That's not a bad start for Oklahoma. Get some guys at home there. And then at Auburn versus Texas, which is going to be the big game there, versus South Carolina, at Ole Miss versus Maine. Shout out Maine. I don't know who your mascot is. At Missouri, Alabama, LSU is very, very tough to finish down the stretch. So where are you at with 7.5? It's close, but where are you at?
Man, it's really tough to pick the under just because that number is so low. And I think this offense can be super talented. I think the defense can be okay. But when I start to chalk up, okay, this is a guaranteed win, I get to 7. Maybe not guaranteed either. I mean, Houston, Tulane, those are tough opponents. I think at Auburn is going to be a tough place to play. I think Oklahoma should win that game. Texas is always a toss-up, but I do think Texas has a little bit more talent. Sorry, Oklahoma fans. I think Texas is just in a more championship-ready spot right now. Maine, South Carolina, those are ones that they should win. At Missouri's tough. Home against Alabama is going to be really tough, especially that late in the year. And then at LSU is no cakewalk. I think that's winnable, so I'm going to go over. I'm going to say they get to 8 wins. I think they win one of those games that I talked about. But it's tough. I mean, I think 8 to 9 wins should be their ceiling this year with this difficult schedule.
Yeah, I'm over 2, so I'm a lock. I think that they hit 7.5 pretty easily. I think they're at 9. I think that there is a game, a possession here or there, they can get to 10. I think that I think they have Texas's number. I don't know. Like after that last year and stuff, and I know it's going to be a kind
That's
of a
fair.
toss up back and forth. Texas fans yell at me there, but I just think that this program is one of those ones that really comes to play. And Venables is one of my favorite coaches, and I think that in big games, I think he is a very very good coach. And I know that he's getting some heat a little bit the last couple of years, but I do think he's good enough to beat Texas again. But I just like their schedule to where they can win I think they're going to win a couple of those games. You're like, oh wow, they beat Ole Miss at Ole Miss. I didn't see that coming. Well, they did. And again, I know Ole Miss is going to be a heavy favorite in that game, but man, that's where it's at. But it really does come down to that offensive line. Like if their offensive line develops, I'm more comfortable there. But I do think over at 7.5, I think this is one of the better bets out there, in my opinion, that you can kind of take right now with where their value is at. So that's really the outlook for Oklahoma. It's an interesting year for them because it's kind of like a stopgap year, maybe. I mean, they have the talent there. I don't see them making the playoff, but I definitely think they can come back 9 wins, develop Jackson Arnold, and then you're looking at next year, you're like, hey, these guys are ready to go. Jackson Arnold's ready to go. We've got a little bit more consistency here. We're recruiting a little bit better. We got some SEC guys coming in here, and you're really looking at Oklahoma there. But as far as this year goes, I think they're getting undervalued right now out there in college football.
Yeah, I think the main goal for this year, and I know Oklahoma fans probably don't want to hear this, but you have to know Jackson Arnold is the dude going into next year too. I think he's going to be the dude either way, and I think that he certainly can be. But I think that that should be one of the main objectives: is to give him every opportunity to show that he is a potential Heisman winner. And I think he's got that talent. I think this offense is going to be good enough to show that. And if they can get to 9 wins in the meantime, I think you're calling that a positive. But
Yeah.
really, really tough schedule. The SEC kind of screwed them a little bit this year, especially when you start to look at Texas' schedule. There seems to be a little bit of bias there. But Oklahoma fans, I hope that they do hit that over. I hope this is a fun year, a fun team to watch. But certainly the program is in a really good state, and I think they can be competitive in the SEC long term. So that's a good place to be.
Well, the best news for Oklahoma is they can do horns down this year at Texas, playing against Texas, and they won't get penalized. So it just means more of the SEC. They can go horns down, and fans out there will love that. So, hey, Oklahoma fans, let us know what you think. Where are you guys at? Do you feel like you're getting kind of undervalued right now and disrespected based on that 7.5 number? Where do you feel like you're at with the offensive line and kind of your offensive line? What do you think? What do you think about kind of your offense going into the season? And hey, can Jackson Arnold I think he can compete with like Nico and some of these other guys, maybe Arch Manning as QB1. He can kind of solidify himself by getting those reps in this year. So you should be excited to have Jackson Arnold under center. So appreciate you guys. We'll check you guys in the next one.